Hello, I'm Wendy Rinaldi. This film is about assessments that I've developed in the area of pragmatics to do with inference and language organisation. I'll start by showing you my assessments for inference. I started to develop these as part of my PhD, so they came under a lot of scrutiny. My supervisor was Professor Klaus Waddell at the London University Institute of Education, and my PhD was examined by Professor Julie Dockrell and Professor Gina Conti-Ramsden. So the first assessment I'll show you is about contradiction between saying and meaning. In a nutshell, you're looking at whether children understand that when how you say something contradicts what you say, it's how you say it that tells you the meaning. The first test is about tone of voice going against what you say. This is one of the pictures from the test. The teacher or therapist starts by saying, Lee, point to the boy in the picture, is telling Abby, my sister's coming to the party. Let's listen to what Abby says about that. You then play a recording that's integrated in the electronic version, or you play the recording on disc if you get the book format. The recording is, Abby says, oh, that's really good. I'll be very happy to see her. Then the teacher or therapist pauses the recording and asks, how does Abby feel about Lee's sister coming to the party? Do you know? If needed, you can play the recording again to assist recall, and then you record the child's response, happy, sad, or angry, or don't know. The child can either say how Abby is feeling about the sister coming to the party, or if they have word-finding problems, they can choose a written word, or if they have reading difficulties, they can choose one of the emotional dogs. If the child doesn't know or can't make up their mind, they can choose the don't know dog. So if the child understands the pragmatics, they will always choose the emotion conveyed by the tone of voice. So with this example, they will say that Abby is angry or choose the angry dog. In the next test, you look at how much the child is helped by seeing the face of the character. So contradiction between words, face and voice. The face and voice always mean the same, so in effect you are looking at adding more non-verbal information. You play the sound again and see if the child wants to choose the same emotion as before or want to change their mind. With children who have language or communication difficulties, you can use the test from around the age of 8, as you can then compare pragmatic comprehension with other kinds of understanding, such as grammatical or semantic knowledge, where the meaning isn't implied by context. You can use the test on older children, teenagers, and adults. Although most of the characters pictured are children, there are some adult characters as well. In this picture, Ollie is with his Auntie Jill. I will be putting together the same test with all the characters pictured as adults, and if you're interested in this, please email enquiries@wendyrinaldi.com. I'm in the process of standardising the test, and the story so far is that most children can understand this kind of communication at about the age of 9, as long as they get the face. So that shows you the importance of making sure that children are looking at you to see your facial expression so that they can understand this kind of communication. Most children younger than 9 can pick up on the contradiction, but they just don't know how to interpret it, and sometimes they can get into quite a dither over it. They're just not sure whether to choose the meaning conveyed by the words or the meaning conveyed by the face and the tone of voice. Children with special needs can have difficulties with inference into their secondary school years, and that's why it's important to identify these problems as soon as possible, because the sooner we identify them, the sooner we can help.
Inference can impact on well-being because the child can think they've understood when they haven't. And so the world can be a pretty confusing place in their eyes.
The second test is about multiple meanings in context. What you're interested in with this test chiefly is whether the child can let go of the more familiar meaning that's rendered implausible by the context. So in this example, the teacher says to Sam, "If you want to pass your test, you'll have to pull your socks up." The picture of Sam with his socks down is not implied by the context, and so if the child understands the pragmatics, they won't choose this picture. In this test, it's important that you allow the child to choose as many pictures as they want, because some children know both meanings, but when they don't understand the pragmatics or aren't confident with it, they will choose both pictures. It's also important to have a don't know picture for children who do rule out the implausible picture but don't know the intended meaning, perhaps if they haven't come across that meaning before. You can use the test with children from around the age of about 10 upwards, and you can also use it with adults. The pictures include both child, teenager and adult characters. Both inference assessments are published in book format or electronically with sound integrated onto the pictures. They come with comparisons on 300 children, and anyone buying the programme now will be able to access the standardisation data at just a small charge, so they won't pay any more as the standardised assessment will be a little more expensive than the current edition. I think the standardisation process is likely to take a couple of years, and I've published the test ahead of this as it's very useful as it stands and much needed.
All the assessments of inference I've shown you can be used to identify difficulties, measure progress, and are short enough to be used as a screen. If you are using them as a screen, I recommend using the assessment of contradiction between face and words on 10-year-olds and the other assessments on 13-year-olds.
If you're using the test with children who have been identified as having language or communication needs, you can use the test on contradiction from around the age of 8 and the multiple meanings test at around 10, as you can then compare pragmatic comprehension with other kinds of understanding, such as grammatical or semantic knowledge, where the meaning isn't implied by context. You can also use both tests to evaluate the effectiveness of teaching or therapy.
The third assessment of pragmatics I'm going to show you on this film is the one to do with organising ideas for communication, and it's called the Language Choices Assessment.
Language organisational difficulties show themselves when the child, teenager or adult has choices to make. So when they need to say or write quite a lot. So if someone asks them a fairly open question, like what did you do at club today, or what happened in a favourite programme last night, or in a school or college context, the question might be to describe an experiment, talk about a piece of art, or write an essay or story. The skills are also needed in work situations like interviews and presentations.
There are many occasions when we need to organise our language, and it's something that students with pragmatic difficulties can struggle with. It won't necessarily be obvious unless you test for it. You know that you're having difficulty following what the student is trying to say, but you won't know why unless you assess it fully.
So with the language choices assessment, you ask the student a selection of questions where you know the content is familiar, but the student has to make choices. There's an assessment key, and this helps you to complete the rating chart. You'll find that some students will have a try at answering the questions, but what they say will be rather jumbled, and they may not mark reference appropriately, so you think they're talking about someone or something, when actually they're talking about something else. Or the student may talk in a lot of detail about one thing because they don't have a way of organising or planning a number of reference.
Some students with language organisational difficulties don't attempt an answer. They say, I don't know, when actually they do know but can't communicate their knowledge. With these students, I check their knowledge by asking questions that narrow down the choices, and that tells you for sure whether or not there are problems with language organisation. So I hope that's given you an idea of the pragmatic assessments I've developed. And if you've got any questions, please get in touch. Bye for now.